broadcast for shooters, hunters, and gun enthusiasts. This is the Firearms Radio Network.
Hello and welcome to episode 170 of Gun Guy Radio. This is the podcast that shines a positive light on the firearms lifestyle. I'm your host, Ryan Machad, and this is your weekly dose of positive firearms talk without the politics. This week, I'm joined by Karl from InRangeTV to discuss the Designated Marksman Rifle, or DMR, concept and its usage in conflicts. Karl recently did a couple videos with Ian discussing the DMR concept, as well as one where he used a DMR in a two-gun match. So, Karl, how you doing?
Good, thanks.
Awesome to have you on the show again. As always, please consider supporting the Firearms Radio Network by shopping Amazon using our Amazon affiliate link at firearmsradio.tv/Amazon. And a portion of your purchase will go towards helping the FRN create awesome pro-gun content like this show. So before we get into the main topic, Karl, I was looking at the videos a while back, actually, and you and Ian did a two-gun match. Now, you guys do these two-gun matches where you use unconventional firearms for a two-gun match. And you were using was M11 with a Lage upper, and Ian was using a Chinese high power with a stock on it, right?
Yeah. I got to correct you slightly. It actually wasn't a two-gun match. It was actually the Barry Steel Open match in Utah.
Okay.
But regardless, it was a combination of three different types of matches. It was Steel Challenge, Steel Target Run and Gun, and then something they called par time stages, which were really interesting, where you had an X amount of time to neutralize as many plates as you could get, and your score was that many plates. So the predominant amount of people there were using pistols, and it was a pistol match. And Ian was using a stock high power, as you said. And there was a PCC category, and we had asked beforehand if it would be okay for me to shoot my submachine gun. And they said, yeah, let's go for it in the PCC category. And they opened it up to anyone who wanted to. I was the only one that brought a submachine gun. But it's rare to get a venue where you can do something unique like that. And our opinions of guns are frequently shaped by what we see in a match or how we shoot in a match or if we're just our square range shooting. And unless you try these unique things, you don't really get to understand how they work until you do it.
Right. I had never seen a subgun run in a match like that. And when I first saw the video, I was like, that's going to be... And I had never seen the Lage upper either, so I wasn't sure how fast, how slow it ran. And I was like, I would think that would slow you down having the increased recoil, the cyclic rate, and having the different, plates. Because a lot of those games, it's about accuracy and actually knocking the plates down with one shot because you got mag changes and everything. But you actually were doing phenomenally well with that gun.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it is. So what my gun is, it's a Max 11 A1, which is pretty much the cheapest submachine gun you can get on the NFA registry. It's a 380 bullet hose. And its original guise, it's kind of useless, to be honest with you. It's this little machine pistol that shoots like 1,300 rounds a minute of 380. It's kind of awful. But then Richard Lage of Lage Manufacturing in Phoenix, I think he's in Mesa, it doesn't matter, Phoenix metropolitan area. He's a great guy, by the way. He started making uppers for the M10, M11, M11A1. He originally made like Uzi size uppers, and then he transitioned to something called the Max series. Original was the Max 31A, which is for the A1, and now this is the one I'm shooting is the Mark II. I happen to have both. And what this does is you take the trigger pack off of your M11 or M11A1, the trigger pack being the registered NFA item. You put his upper on it, conversion upper, and it turns it into a 9mm from a 380, and it takes 71 round Suomi M31 drums. It also takes, oddly, Sten mags if you convert them slightly. And I have a subset, believe it or not, of 4 World War II era MP38, MP40 mags that the Germans had converted for the M31 Suomi because they got them provided to them by the Finns, right. so they could fit their and I use that in my gun as well. So I'm using MP40 mags. It's kind of crazy.
No, it was awesome. At first, I thought it was like either a 45 or a 9 because it was just anchoring those plates off the stands.
Well, first of all, shooting a submachine gun is a different manual of arms and you have to learn how to shoot the gun. It's not like shooting a rifle. First of all, it's an open bolt, so follow-through is paramount. And once you get good at the cyclic rate of your gun and get to learn it well and you have a good submachine gun that's reliable, if you watch the video, you'll notice I'm getting frequently single or not doubles, usually double round taps at targets. And the reason those things are getting hammered so hard is I was actually hitting the plate with both rounds.
Oh, okay. So that's why I was going to say, I was like, it's just ripping them right off the top of those stands.
Yeah, so I mean, I was shooting 115 grain, but I mean, you get two 9mm hits like right next to one another. You're getting, 230 grains of bullet impact on that target. And I wouldn't, that match was actually quite accuracy intensive. There was lots of little small plates, but what I would do is there was these little rams that they would put out at 25 or even 50 yards, and they were considered bonus targets. And I hit every one of them by just doing a controlled burst in the general vicinity of the target, letting the submachine gun climb up into the target, and inevitably a round or two would hit it.
No, it was really cool. I'll put a link in the show notes for you to go check that. Is there do you know, like a website or something he has for anybody who happens to have one of those guns?
Lage Manufacturing. Here, I'll get it for you, actually.
Okay.
I cannot recommend him highly enough. He's fantastic. His website is www.max1111.com. So max-11.com.
Awesome. Yeah, be sure to check that out. That link will be in the show notes, and there'll be a link to the video as well. So
let me say one thing on that real quick. So, frankly, the NFA and machine gun world is hard to get into. It's expensive. There's a limited number of things on the registry, and you have to pay your $200 tax stamp and transfer it and all that. But these Max submachine guns are the cheapest ones. I mean, you can get a Mac for they're going up at like $4,000.
Yeah,
which is a lot of money, but you get that, and you throw his $895 upper on it, and you have a fantastic submachine gun. I would gladly, if someone challenged me to a match where I was shooting my Lage upper against their MP5, I'll take them up on it, and I think I'll win.
No, it's definitely awesome. I think, subguns.com is a good place if you want to go look for that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And the Mark II is just great. I have the Mark I. The Mark II is just even better. It's got a cyclic rate of around 750 rounds per minute, 800, which, by the way, from my experience, is optimal. There's a reason the Uzi's in that realm. 600's a little slow. 1000's a little fast. When you get in the middle there, it's controllable. The bursts are nice and smooth, and you can keep the rounds on the target.
I know firing a grease gun one time, it was like, okay, dunk, 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 dunk.
Yeah, you're all over the place. It's good for suppression, but it's kind of hard to keep things where you want them.
That big heavy bolt.
Yep, but that 800 rounds per minute kind of gives you this soft little push, and you can really get 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hits on a target.
Excellent. So be sure to go check those links out. And with that, we will head into the main topic, history and use of the designated Marksman rifle with Karl of InRangeTV.
Do you shop on Amazon? How about your spouse? Does your mom? Does your company? Why not use the Firearms Radio Network's Amazon affiliate link next time you shop Amazon? Bookmark firearmsradio.tv/Amazon or click through the Amazon link in the right-hand corner of firearmsradio.tv. Get it? Got it? Amazon it!
All right, so we're into the main topic. Now, there are links for all the videos we're going to talk about here. Karl and Ian did a video recently discussing the evolution of the DMR. And the video I'm talking about, Karl, is the one where you guys had all 4 rifles lined up on the wall there, or 4 or 5. And so how did the DMR concept even start, and what really defines a DMR?
Well, by the way, these terms are... Everything is subjective to a degree, right? So history isn't even necessarily directly a fact-based exercise. Some of it is subjective and experience and what you can discover. But the DMR, the designated marksman rifle, I mean, there were sharpshooters that go back pre-Civil War, right? Civil War, you have the first United Sharpshooters, States sharpshooters, and they were essentially an entire regiment that were sometimes referred to as Berdan's sharpshooters, and they were considered the marksmen of their day. And instead of being a DMR embedded with a smaller platoon, they were an entire regiment of sharpshooters, and they were used to try and affect the battlefield with accurate fire, and they were quite effective. But that really isn't a DMR role. A designated marksman role is one in which you take a soldier or group of soldiers out of a normal division or platoon and augment them with capabilities to let them reach out further and more accurately than the other guys in their group. So let's say you have a bunch of M4s and you've got one SDM gun with them, which is probably a 20-inch free-floated barrel match trigger, A4 configuration with an ACOG or something 1-4 or even something different variable on top of it. Even with recent conflicts, that idea which started to come back, early 2000s in the war on terror, really turned out to be very effective. So, but that's what the DMR is. Now, your question was, where did it start? Is that correct?
Yeah, like what was it? Because I mean, we see nowadays, or at least in my eyes, and correct me if I'm wrong, early on, maybe the 90s or so, most of our troops just armed with your standard M16 or M4. And in the 2000s and in the 2010s, we started to see more and more soldiers getting optics. Whereas before it was, irons, and only a few soldiers would have optics. And now it seems like optics are becoming more of a general use thing, to the point where, you maybe could consider a lot of people DMRs, except they're using, the 5.56 rather than like something the 7.62. But going back in history, where did that start, that whole concept of giving the soldier an optic to be able to reach out further?
So I said this goes the idea of sharpshooters goes back before the Civil War, but they started putting optics even on guns in the Civil War, but that's not a DMR role.
Right.
There's a couple little instances where you see this idea kind of surface. You see a little blip of it in World War I, but the battlefield wasn't exactly as dynamic as later wars were, and so that concept didn't apply as much. In World War I, you generally had more of what we consider now a sniper, although they called them sharpshooters or snipers then. But in World War II, this idea of this augmentation to give the soldier more range and more accuracy, really the first instance of seeing it truly put into large-scale use was the Germans. And we mentioned that in the video. So they came out with this scope, a ZF-40, which became the ZF-41. It's this 1.5x scout scope, actually, that would go out right on top of the rear iron sight of a Kar 98, and you would still have access to the irons, but you'd have this scope above it, and it was initially intended to give it to everyone. That was the first goal, kind of like what you're starting to see now, but it didn't happen. They couldn't quite make it happen. The manufacturing compatibility and the machining wasn't quite there, and it didn't fit onto every gun, so they had to fit it to a subset of guns. So it transitioned from everyone into designated marksmen or sharpshooters, Scharfschützen, snipers is another term, but sharpshoots a sharpshooter, and landed up giving a subset of these. The next goal was to give a subset of these to each platoon, so that there would be your regular group of men armed with Kar 98s, just irons, and there'd be these one or two guys that had this that could provide more accurate, more precise fire at longer distances just by popping on this 1.5x scope. But without sacrificing any of the normal capabilities of the K98, you could still put a bayonet on it, and you still have the same rate of fire you would with a standard K98 because it didn't interfere with the stripper clip loading. So that's where you really first, in my opinion, see large-scale implementation, manufacture, and development and actual deployment of a designated marksman role. Even if they called it sharpshooter, that was the first real huge instance of a designated marksman in a conflict.
Right. When I think of a designated marksman role and designated marksman rifle, I think of more of a traditional rifle, maybe with like a full auto capability or something like that, and the person has they're able to switch, like you did with the video we're going to talk about next. They're able to switch from CQB roles. They kind of have one gun that can do a bunch of things pretty well, but you don't have the level of precision that you have with like a sniper rifle, but you also don't have the CQB abilities, like the perfect ones that you might have with like a subgun or something.
Right. No. So I think one of the things you see here is with the ZF-41 designated marksman effort in the German army was to augment a regular soldier with something that gave him more range without sacrificing rate of fire, but still using standard ammunition. And then the Germans continued to evolve that idea. They came out with the semi-automatic G41, but they didn't do much with that from a DMR role. The G43 is where they really advanced this. All of them, most of them, if not all of them, were manufactured with a side rail, and that rail was designed to accept a ZF4, a 4X scope. Here's where you see 4X pop into the realm of things. And it was you could take it on or off. So the rifle was a semi-automatic 8mm Mauser, standard cartridge as the rest of the guys you were embedded with, magazine fed but semi-auto. But you could throw the scope on there, and while they initially intended that rifle to be a sniper rifle, it actually didn't have the accuracy sufficient per the snipers of the time to be a sniper rifle. But if you read the memoirs and read how they were used, there were many quote-unquote snipers that would take this G43 with the 4X ZF4 scope on it into 200, 300, 400-yard conflicts where they were actually now being DMRs. So a lot of their men would be assaulting or defending, and they would be laying down accurate fire from a somewhat concealed position, but semi-automatic fire, which provided a higher level of suppression and, of course, KIA on the other side than you could with standard iron-sighted rifle. So they evolved that idea. So I agree with you. I don't think that it has to be a full quote-unquote battle cartridge, and we'll get to that in a little bit in the conversation. But you see the Germans evolve this, the ZF-41 on a K98. Then you see the G43 with the detachable ZF-4 scope in a semi-automatic roll. And then, frankly, right after the war, not right after, 10 years, they start developing in the Soviet Union. They saw this concept, went, wow, we like this, and started developing the SVD Dragunov. And it started getting deployed in the early 60s. But if you look at the G43 and you look at the SVD, it is absolutely the evolution of the concept.
Right. Now, would you consider, just touching upon this real quick, I know you guys have a lot of experience with the FG42, would you consider that sort of a DMR where you had the option of going between semi and full on that?
I don't. The intentions of the FG42 was to provide paratroopers the capabilities of a rifle and a machine gun at the same time, not accurate fire. So while it could take a scope, very, very few of them ever had a scope. Most of them only used irons, and that was really designed to be some middle ground between a rifle and a G40, an MG42, which they couldn't drop with. Right. So by giving paratroopers those, they kind of gave them something in between. So no, I do not believe that was a DMR rifle.
Okay. Were there any differences in cartridges when employing a DMR? Did they want to use the traditional full power, either 8mm or like 303 or anything like that? Or did they want to transition to a more intermediate cartridge?
Well, in World War II, you look at them using the German side, they used the same stuff. So they used 8mm Mauser. Now, there were some that were considered match-grade loads, for example. But if you look at the memoirs, very, very rarely did they ever get that stuff in the field. So there was this supposedly better grade 8mm Mauser ammunition, but it was still standard 7.92 by 57. Those cartridges were interchangeable with the rest of the squad, with the rest of the machine guns. They just they tried to get their hands on match-grade stuff. I had the opportunity to do a class with Mark Vorobiev he's an ex-Spetsnaz Afghan sniper, and he's doing training still, and I did a class with him, and he said that very rarely did they ever get their hands on the supposedly more accurate ammunition in the field. He was almost always using standard 54R that he pulled out of a machine gun belt or wherever he could get a hold of it, because as you can imagine, in a conflict, getting special ammunition to the right guys is something the Germans learned at the end of World War II was nearly impossible. You just pretty much get what you get. And so using a DMR, one of the things a DMR rifle probably should be, and kind of historically has been, is using ammunition and cartridges interchangeable with the rest of their forces.
Okay. Now, if you could design a DMR today, would you go with a full power cartridge like the 7.62 by 5.1 or the 5.4? Or would you go with something more intermediate, like a 6.5 round?
That's an argument about just cartridge capabilities in general. 5.56 has kind of pretty much proven itself, especially in the Mark 262 loads with the 77 grain bullets. I would have to say that, I've seen such good success in terms of accuracy as well as what the Mark 262 can do, but I think the middle ground doesn't need to be a new cartridge. The middle ground probably is that load. So I would, if I was king and I could make such a thing happen, I think the thing to do would be just to transition away from M855 and XM193 or M193 and just move wholly to the Mark 262. So I would stick with 5.56 so that you have the ammo interchangeability. But if we could do it, I would give everyone that better ammunition.
Yeah, logistically, it would make more sense.
I think that's what it's all about, the logistics. You can't, if you give a DMR guy and he's embedded with a platoon and he's out there in the field and it turns into something, the new World War III, do you really think you're going to get him that special ammo, or is he going to be scrounging ammo, unfortunately, off of dead comrades, or maybe just from living comrades? Hey, I'm out, give me some. It makes total sense. You don't want to have something that's unique.
Now, when employing a DMR, what are some of the limitations you think some of the earlier designs, like either the SVD or the G43, had? And have we fixed those deficiencies, or do they still exist in the modern iterations?
I think we fixed some of them and introduced others. So for example, the G43 was never wildly accurate. The G43 is a 3.5 minute gun. So people by modern standards thinks that's horrendous. But if you think about it, pushed into a DMR roll out to 400 yards, 400 meters, what's 3.5 inches? Or what's a 3 MOA gun at 4? It's 12 inches.
Right.
So can you still get a chest hit on a Soviet soldier? Yeah, absolutely. It's effective for its intended purpose. The SVD is better than that. The SVD tends to be 2 minute. I've seen stuff on the internet that's 1 minute. The guns are different. The ammunition's different. I consider it a 2 minute gun. But so what is that? If it's a 2 minute gun, what does that push you out to? 800 meters? probably, for a chest hit, for a center of mass hit. So what I would do, so they were sufficient for their roles, and the SVD I think still is for its role. But what's happened is you see the SDM gun as it came into American use. You'll see some modified M14s that have scopes on them as such. I don't think very highly of those guns myself. Some people, I don't mean to be sacrilegious to anyone, that's just not. They tend to shoot loose. They don't tend to retain their accuracy, and you're dealing with a gun that's hard to keep maintained. The other SDM side of the fence was, like I said, the 20-inch, M16A4 with an ACOG or something on it. Those things have proven themselves to be incredibly fantastic, and there is a migration from those being strictly DMR, SDM guns to being standard guns. Like more and more Marines, as I understand it, I'm not a Marine, so I can't speak for them directly, but as I understand what's going on is ACOGs are becoming more and more common, and what was an SDM gun, maybe with the exception of not having a matched trigger, is becoming more and more the standard rifle. Well, I think that's the evolution you're going to see because optics have become capable of handling that. They are soldier-proof. ACOGs they're not the best optic in the world, but they're certainly sufficient, and they are definitely soldier-proof. I think you're going to see a conversion where maybe the DMR will become the standard rifle, but we're not quite there yet.
Yeah, I'd seen some introductions. I'd heard of, the Knight's Armament, the M110 being introduced, and that's in 308, I think. And that sort of, you're getting to the point there where that could almost be considered a sniper's rifle as opposed to a DMR, right?
Well, the semi-automatic rifles historically it's hard to get a semi-automatic rifle to be as accurate as a bolt action equivalent. But that's starting to change. Modern machining, modern manufacturing, modern designs are changing that. These semi-automatic rifles are now sufficiently comparable to that of a bolt-action rifle. So if you were in the field and you were an actual sniper versus... Now, let's get this. This is the confusion that I think comes about. In World War II, you hear sniper, and you hear sharpshooter, and you hear sharpshooter. They were all used interchangeably, and they didn't necessarily mean the same thing. You'll see sniper used in Soviet doctrine and Soviet manuals, and they are referring to two different things. There's the squad of two guys that go out looking for trouble and shoot at targets, high-value targets far away, and then sneak into the wilderness. That's one sniper. But the Soviets also call the sniper the DMR, who was the guy embedded with the squad that just provided longer-range precision fire. That word, and because they use the word interchangeably, has confused the conversation. So if you were truly a sniper by modern standards, the guy that sneaks through the field and gets that 800-yard shot on a high-value target, if you now have sufficient belief, trust, and accuracy in a semi-automatic rifle, with the exception of the cartridges ejecting out the side, which can be an issue, wouldn't you take that? Because what if you're overrun, or what if you're detected? You now have a rifle that can kind of bridge the gap. If you're dealing with a bolt-action gun, I don't know about you, but trying to shoot lots of close targets with a bolt-action rifle, especially if they're armed with semi-automatic assault rifles, kind of sucks. I wouldn't want to have to deal with it. So if I had the choice between a semi-automatic rifle that could perform the same role or a bolt-action rifle, I can't imagine why, with rare exception, why you wouldn't go with the semi-automatic. And I think that's becoming the reality now.
Right. And well, and I believe I've heard you say that the G43 had that first shot zero problem, which...
That was the SV40. Actually, no, that was the SVT-40 that had that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the Russian SVT-40 was intended to be a sniper rifle, not a DMR. And so we mentioned that in the video, I think. And they never could quite get the accuracy problem solved with the SVT-40. They would stick that PU scope on there, and there was a significant zero issue where you would fire the gun and the first round would go wild, and then subsequent rounds would go back to the zero. Well, if it's intended to be a sniper rifle, that's a pretty poor sniper rifle. And so they kind of gave up on it, stopped cutting the scope rails into the receiver, and ditched that idea and just made it a semi-automatic battle rifle.
Yeah, that first round's pretty important with the sniper.
Yes. See, now in a DMR, though, it wouldn't be as much. Now, you don't want to miss with the DMR, but if you're actually in a large engagement battlefield and that first round's a little wild, you don't want that. Of course, that's not desirable, but does that matter as much? No, but it goes to show you that the Russians weren't thinking that role yet. Right. They were thinking sniper at that time. Then they encountered the G43, encountered the use of the G43 in a DMR role, and then subsequently post-war designed the SVT as their G43. They liked it, saw it, and realized it was effective.
So the next video, and the one where you actually employed one of these rifles, was the one where you used the SVD, but it's an NDM-86, which is... What's the difference between those two?
Design-wise, nothing. The NDM-86 was a small lot of supposedly Chinese manufactured SVDs, so Dragunovs. Okay. They brought in a couple thousand of each caliber. They brought in 54R and they brought in 308 NATO 7.62 by 51. Now, there is rumor that the NDM-86 were Russian guns funneled through China into the United States. I don't know if that's fact or fiction. I can't vouch or not vouch for that. I have seen pictures and heard people tell me that there's an occasional NDM-86 that has a Russian stamp on it, a proof mark. I've never held one. I've just heard of it. Mine does not. But it is an SVD Dragunov manufactured either by the Russians or the Chinese, identical in every way. In fact, the parts on it are interchangeable with the Russian guns, and I mentioned that in one of my other videos.
So you ran this in the two-gun action match, and you went between CQB and longer range targets. And in the video, you stated that you really wanted to see how it would perform between in those two ranges. And I remember looking at the comments. There were quite a few people who were like, "Man, this is not going to go well for you." And you actually did really, really well.
I did okay, yeah. So this is one of the principles of InRangeTV, and hopefully people that watch us regularly understand this, is that we want to test these ideas. We don't want to just talk about them. So I don't think that you can look at it or hold it at a square range and just shoot at targets idea. So the best litmus test that I have is my match that I run, the two-gun challenge match. Other matches may be good litmus tests, but I think when you put the closer you can put this equipment into a practical shooting environment, the closer you can get to having a real idea of how they would or do perform. So when the SVD was originally designed, and I've got a copy of the actual Soviet manual that's been translated into English, which is an excellent book, by the way. It specifically mentions that it was designed so that you could take the scope off, which was the PSO-1 4X scope, put it in the pouch. There's a pouch on your right side that holds 4 magazines and has a place to put the scope. You put the scope in there, and so what you can do is then take the cheek pad off, and with the iron sights, you can join the rest of your platoon in other combat duties. So let's say for whatever reason you are crossing the street, or you're kicking indoors, or you're in a urban environment, or it's close range for some reason, a forest. The scope isn't going to help you. You take the scope off and you join the rest of your group with the rifle you have, not with an optimal rifle, it's not an AK, but you can at least join the fight. And they didn't want to lose the DMR guy to specifically only a DMR role. They wanted him to be able to bridge that gap. So at the match, I did exactly that. I took it a step further. Being that it's 2015, I didn't use the iron sights. What I did is I put on a red dot scope. Now, the Russians have all sorts of interesting CQB optics. There's a whole myriad of them. They have more of them than we do. So I thought, if the doctrine was in 63 to use the irons for this, well, why wouldn't I put a red dot on for the doctrine in 2015? And that's what I did for the match.
It was really interesting. Now, did you find the transition between the long range, particularly that 100-yard spinner, because that's one you got to shoot in sort of a certain timing to get it to actually spin around? Mm-hmm. Did you find that really difficult for switching between the two, or did you make the switch pretty easily?
No, frankly, it was kind of a piece of cake. So we have this MGM spinner target. It's a very interesting, challenging target, and it really puts a lot of accuracy and timing tests to the challenge. A lot of shooters have a hard time with it. We put it at 100 yards. And so there's an 8-inch circle on the bottom, and I think it's a 4-inch circle on the top. And it's this plate that hangs directly at a 180 degree. And when you hit it, it starts to move. And as you hit it, you have to hit the top and the bottom, or just the bottom if you're good, in the right pattern while it's swinging at the right timing, and the goal is to make this thing spin a full 360 degrees. There's a couple things that are challenging about it. One, you have to have a sufficient power factor to do it, which, by the way, 5.56 can, and a number of shooters did spin it at the match with 5.56. It just took them longer. Two, you have to be sufficiently accurate to hit it consistently and repetitively at the right time. So if you hit it when it's coming towards you, you'll stop it. And if you hit it when it's swinging the other direction, if you don't hit it at the right time, you won't impart the momentum to the target you need to get it to spin. And like I said, thirdly, you have to actually hit it. You can't, for example, if it's getting ready to spin and you miss a single shot, you may lose all of the momentum you gained in the previous shots. So, no, it was quite easy. First of all, the SVD has a bipod mounted to it. It goes onto the receiver. I had the bipod on there, which is acceptable in my match, depending on which category you're in. Had the bipod deployed, got on the ground, and the red dot, which was a 4 MOA red dot, that plate was still big enough at 100. It was, I think, I spun it in 3 rounds. I fired a 4th shot thinking I needed it and didn't, so I actually increased my time. I actually spun it in around 9 seconds, but that 4th round I fired bumped me up to 13 seconds. But no, it was a piece of cake. Transitioning from that with the red dot to close-range targets didn't matter. The red dot works like a red dot. If that spinner target had been at 200 yards, I think it still would have been easy. I think at 400 or 300 it would have started to get challenging.
Now, do the iron sights on the SVD, are they standard like your AK-type sights, or are they different?
they're identical to AK sights with the exception of there being a longer sight radius. So the SVD has one thing in that it has a very long barrel. It's 24 inches. And so the front sight's near the end of that, and the rear sight's, of course, where you would consider a standard AK sight on a receiver. So you have a longer sight radius, but the sight picture is identical.
Okay. Yeah, I was curious about that. I didn't know if they actually went with a different sighting system because it was a different roll, but...
No, I mean, if you think about what I said earlier, where if they take the scope off and join in with the rest of their group, their platoon, their squad, whatever, they're going to have the same sight picture. And if, God forbid, that the DMR guy is shot and killed and someone else picks up the rifle, guys that are trained on the AK will understand those sights.
Right. Now, in terms of the caliber, what if you had your pick, and, well, you probably did have your pick, but what would you go with, the 7.62 by 5.4R or the 308?
Really, in terms of power, there's not enough of a difference to worry about that. I went with 308, and I prefer 308 strictly because I live here in the United States. The availability of 308 ammunition and components are easier, and I can reload for that gun much easier than you can for 54R. So for me, I think the 308 makes more sense, but there's nothing wrong with the 54R gun. They're both great guns. I just chose 308 for the reasons I just enumerated. Yeah, supply chain.
Yeah, the 54R. I mean, and plus getting match grade ammunition for the 54R, you really got to be a reloader for that, as far as I know.
Well, Hornady made it for a while, and then they stopped. There is occasionally little blurps of it that came out of Russia, but it's hard to get. So with the 54R, you are for the most part stuck with surplus, which isn't horrible. In fact, some of that stuff's pretty good. But if you have the 308 gun, of course, you can reload to the gun. You can reload your own ammunition. You can buy all sorts of match stuff. You could shoot 168 grain, 175 grain, 150 grain, whatever suits your fancy and your particular shooting situation.
Right. There's definitely no shortage of match grade 308 in the United States.
No. And that's why my NDM 86 isn't 308. Now, that being said, if you decide you want to look into getting one of these guns, they're all expensive. There's no such thing as a low-price SVD on the market. And by the way, guys, an SVD is not a PSL. They are different guns entirely. A PSL is just a giant AK. An SVD Dragunov is truly a different gun, no interchangeable parts. But regardless of that, they're all expensive. The 308s actually tend to be a little cheaper. However, the magazines for the 308 are moon rocks. They're very hard to get. If you get one of these rifles, keep in mind that you're going to fight and struggle to get magazines, and you're going to pay between $300 to $400 per magazine for that gun.
Wow, that actually is more expensive than the magazines for my 1903 Colt.
It's horrible. The situation with the NDM 86 308 is particularly troublesome because they only made so many of them. They only imported so many of them. They imported X amount of magazines with it when they brought them into the country, and that's all that's here. So first you got to find them, and then if you find them, you got to pay for them because the people that have them know that they're worth money.
Wow. Yeah, that's as much as like a handgun.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. You have 4 magazines for your NDM 86, and you've spent more than you would on a high-end AR.
Right. Now, if you could change anything on the SVD to make it more useful in a match like this, or in a DMR role, in your eyes, what would those changes be?
Not a lot, but a couple things. The barrel's too long. The 24-inch barrel's obnoxious. I'm not sure. I'm sure that the rationale for that at the time was to get all the velocity they could out of the cartridge, as well as, frankly, to extend the sight radius on the iron sights. That's a big deal, but in reality, you don't need that anymore, especially with modern CQB-type optics. So if it was me, I'd cut that barrel down to about 18 inches, especially for 308. That's about where you want to be. And I would increase the capacity of the magazines. Here's the thing. This is how well they designed that gun. If you ask me, that's all I would do. I'd cut the barrel length, and I'd have higher capacity magazines. If you were to put 20-round magazines on that gun and put an 18-inch barrel on it, be fantastic. I don't know what else you could complain about. The trigger's good, the accuracy's sufficient, the interchangeability of optics, the fact that you can slide them on and off the rail. I mean, you can go within seconds from a red dot optic to a 4x scope to a 3-9 to an 8x scope to a reflex scope to irons by just flipping a lever and pulling it off or putting it on, and you can put it in your pouch. So that is incredibly durable and flexible. So all I would change is magazine capacity and barrel length. After that, it's kind of a perfect gun in my opinion.
What is it, the 5 or 10 round mags?
They're 10-round mags,
10
yeah.
rounds.
Which you can look at makes sense when I talk about where they derived the idea from. G43 was 10-round mags. SVD is 10-round mags. So when I talked to Mark Vorobiev about that, he talked about his experience in Afghanistan, and they would carry 4 magazines in a pouch, 1 in the gun, so that's 50 rounds, and then they would have loose ammunition in their pack. And this really puts an emphasis on a DMR role versus a sniper role. He would be in a certain position, and they would dig a hole, a trench. They'd dig a fighting position, and in the class we dug these fighting positions. You would dig this fighting position, hopefully with good camouflage. You would dig a little table in the dirt where you'd stack your mags. You'd literally take them out of your pouch because you didn't want to have to try to get them, and he would stack his mags on this dirt table that you built, and you would get your gun in there and have a little firing position hole, and you would live in that hole until the assault began or the defense occurred. So when the assault began, his troops, the other guys are running across in the Soviet wave attack, and he'd be in this fighting position applying accurate fire. If it turned into a defense, he would be doing the same thing. In fact, they issued armor plates for him that he thought were horrible to wear, but okay for armor. So he said it was actually worse to wear the armor because the bullet would go through and you'd get secondary shrapnel from it. So what he would do is take these armor plates and bury them in the dirt in front of his position to provide extra defense against incoming rounds. The point I'm making is the DMR in the Soviet environment didn't move from their firing position. They were like a fixed machine gun. They applied accurate fire from that position, and that was their role.
Right. They have a few fields of fire, and that's where they're going to operate.
Crisscrossing ranges of fire with it. So imagine if you put a fixed machine gun, instead replacing it with a guy with an SVD. That's exactly what they did. Same idea.
And just as effective. I mean, if providing accurate fire like that, and picking targets off that are actually coming into the battle.
Sure, if resources are limited, and a sniper, sharpshooter, SDM, DMR, providing accurate fire with single shots is going to not deplete those resources as quickly as a belt-fed machine gun will, and it's not as likely to attract attention. If you have a good fighting hole and you have good camouflage, if you're careful and you've got a good flash hider, which the SVD does, you could probably be there a while before they figure out where you are. And even once they figure out where you are, depending on how well you've dug your hole, can they even get you? It would be a very tricky shot. And that was the whole point. Yeah.
Now, before we wrap up the main topic, anything else you want to add on the DMR or anything like that?
Well, like I said, I think things are changing, and I think I don't know if the DMR role is going to go away. So you saw in the early 2000s, I was shooting NRA high power quite a bit at the time, and there was this DMR resurgence program in the United States was really ramping up in the early 2000s, and this is when they were taking what were kind of 3-gun open guns and turning them into DMR rifles. So 20-inch barrels, free-floated, bipod. At that time, ACOG was the whiz-bang thing. Now you're starting to see variable scopes, a 2-stage trigger, and a semi-automatic rifle. These DMR guns were generally not fully automatic, and then they would cut, and then Mark 262 with 77 grain bullets, and they were actually taking distinguished marksmen from the civilians and high masters and masters, and having them train soldiers, U.S. soldiers in the DMR role and in accurate fire, and then deploying this as a prototype program into the field. And there are the accounts that I've read about it were that they were incredibly successful. But as we're seeing now, what was that DMR gun is I think in the future is going to turn into kind of the standard gun. And if a DMR role does spring back up, I think you're going to see it be, and as we were describing earlier, 308. But the reason you're going to see, or maybe some other cartridge, some other larger cartridge than 5.56, and the reason for that is because they want to not just, if you give all of the troops an ACOG or some sort of DMR gun, you extended all of their range and accuracy, right, in theory? So now you want to extend that range and accuracy further than the capabilities of the cartridge. And so that's where you're going to see something bigger. So is the DMR role going to go away for the U.S.? I don't know. I can't answer that. But I think that you're going to see larger cartridges come into that role as what was the DMR role become sort of a standard rifle, at least for some parts of the U.S. Armed Forces. More of
a natural evolution, like you're talking about.
Yeah. So imagine all the Marine. I don't imagine every Marine has essentially a DMR rifle with an ACOG, and now the DMR is going to be, like you said, the M110 or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Excellent. So I think that's a good primer discussion on the DMR and the stuff you guys have done. So with that, we'll wrap up the main topic and we will close out the show.
Ballroom jeans, fire hose work pants, and long tail tees are 3 favorites among the men of Gun Guy Radio. Duluth Trading Company has perfected the art of clothing the manly man. If you want manly comfort that's trusted by these gun guys, go to gunguyradio.com/Duluth and check out the other manly essentials Duluth Trading Company offers gun guys like us.
Well, Karl, I just want to thank you so much for coming on. I think the listeners will really like the episode. I know they liked the World War I and II guns we did last time you were on. And I think they're going to really like the videos, too, if they haven't already seen them over on Full 30. So where can people find you and Ian? And what do you guys have anything coming up that's going to be on Full 30 that you want to talk about? Or
Yeah, we've got some interesting stuff coming up. First of all, if you want to find us, we do have our own website, which is www.InRange.tv. We don't really do much there except embed all of our videos, so if you just want to go to one place that has all of our videos, you can go there. You can also go to full30.com, FULL30.com. The InRangeTV channel is based there. That is the only place we put up our content, and you can go to the InRange channel there and get all of our content there as well directly. And Forgotten Weapons, which is Ian's individual project, is also on Full 30 as well as YouTube, and he's got ForgottenWeapons.com. I help him with that, but InRange and him, InRange TV is him and I together directly. So those are the sites you can go to look at our content. We do have some interesting stuff coming up. We acquired a replica version of World War I German scallop machine gun armor. So in World War I, the fixed machine guns, they provided these guys, some of them at least, armor, and it looks like scalloped plates. It looks like plate mail from medieval era, and the idea was to help defend them against incoming rifle fire, shrapnel, etc., as they did, much like we were talking about with DMRs, stayed in a fixed position and laid down fire, making them a wonderful target. So there's not a lot of information about how well that original armor worked, but there is some information about how it was manufactured, what its hardness was, its thickness, etc. So we're going to test these. IMA, the International Military Antiques guys, sent us a copy of this stuff, of this armor. We're going to test it for hardness, and then we're going to set it up at range, 300, 400 yards, and we're going to fire at it with period-correct ammunition and see if it actually stops stuff.
I was going to say, I'm pretty sure I saw a picture of Ian wearing it on the Facebook page.
Yeah, we're going to fire 30-06 at it, 8 Lebel, maybe 303, and we're also going to put some handgun rounds at it, 45 ACP, some other stuff. And we're going to see at 32 ACP, which I'm sure will stop. But we're curious about how well this stuff worked. Now, the first thing we've got to test is the modern replica armor as good as, or maybe even better, which could be, than what they issued in World War I. That's the first part. We're doing that part now. But then after that, once we get an idea of where it is in regards to the original stuff, we're going to shoot it up, and we're going to let you guys know what happens.
That would be awesome. I can't wait to see that. I'd like to see something on... I do like the old trench guns from World War I, the 1897. I'd love to see some stuff, like some testing of actually how effective that would have been in the confines of a trench.
Well, the Germans didn't think very highly of them because they said that if they caught anyone with one, they would execute them.
Yes, I remember that.
So they apparently were concerned about them. Now, what I'm going to try to do and include in this video where we're shooting this German scallop armor is I'm going to try and include some modern plates too, ceramic and maybe some steel, and we'll show where things have gone because, I mean, that's early armor, right, and where things are now, and we'll see what those same cartridges do on that stuff at the same distance.
Excellent. So there will be links to those websites and videos in the show notes, so be sure to check those out. So, Karl, thanks again. I really appreciate it, and look forward to having you again on the show sometime in the future.
Thanks for having me, and I hope everyone enjoyed the conversation.
Gun Guy Radio says thank you, and proudly displays artwork and graphics designed by Ryan Cross of Hunter of Design. HunterofDesign.com.
I hope you're enjoying Gun Guy Radio, and if you are, please consider going over to patreon.com/FRN. What is Patreon, you might ask? Well, Patreon is a simple way for you to crowdfund every episode of Gun Guy Radio. If you're enjoying the show, you can head over to patreon.com/FRN and pledge $1 an episode or $5 an episode to help support pro-gun radio like this. So that about wraps up this episode of Gun Guy Radio. Remember to subscribe to us on iTunes so that you never miss a show. And please leave us a review there as well, gunguyradio.com/iTunes. Please consider joining the NRA and the Second Amendment Foundation. There are links there in the show notes. And don't forget to check out the other shows on the Firearms Radio Network. Also, be sure to check out the Patriot Patch Company, started by FRN's own Jake Challand and Ryan Cross. Patriot Patch Company offers high-quality 3D PVC vinyl patches with Velcro backing that is sure to satisfy any taste. Their new I'm Your Huckleberry patch is available for pre-order and is a personal favorite. Be sure to check them out at www.patriotpatch.co. This is Ryan Machad, and I'll see you next week.
This has been a production of the Firearms Radio Network. You can find more information at firearmsradio.tv.
Are you looking for an extraordinary daily carry option? Look no further. Karl is giving away a P9 with night sights right here on the Firearms Radio Network. It's Karl's EDC drawing. To enter, simply become a Patreon of any Firearms Radio Network show. Current patrons are automatically entered. But wait, there's more. Keybar, Hellbent holsters, Alien Gear holsters, Precision Ear, and more have ponied up to enhance your EDC loadout. See all of these awesome prizes and more ways to enter at firearmsradio.tv/EDC.